Okay, onto the biblical narrative and the mainstream historical narrative of, so the biblical narrative full stop, and then the mainstream narrative about the Bronze Age and what transpired during the Bronze Age collapse. This is just an introduction to get a clear view of what exactly we're talking about, so that everybody understands what is at stake. And in the next video, I will show you the proof of my basis of the basic hypothesis. But for now, we're just going to lay out the two narratives, and the two narratives are these. First, the biblical one. In the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, which are said to have been written by Moses. And these are the events leading up to the Canaanite invasion, according to the Torah. And next, in the book of Joshua, book 6, the Canaanite conquest is described. And in book 1, Genesis, this is not relevant for us. This is where Moses relates what he knew about previous history, or what was known at the time of previous history. And we start at Exodus, so that's book 2, and which is about Moses taking over the leadership of the Israelite people, the 12 tribes, and leading them out of Egypt, because Israel was in Egypt at the time, and they were under Pharaoh, and they were in slavery, and they desired to be free. So they escaped Egypt, and they moved into the Sinai desert, and they were en route to Canaan, because the plan was to invade Canaan and conquer the place, because this was the promised land. And as we know, Abraham had been promised the country of the land of Canaan for Israel, and Moses was to be the man, actually getting in there. So this was the plan. They were going to Canaan, but there was a problem. The man dared not attack. And this is related in Numbers 4. So they had the divine plan. They had a prophet as a leader, and Moses had a great deal of status. There's no doubt about that. And they were carrying along the Ark of the Covenant with Yahweh in there, supposedly. Yeah, and when just relating the text here, and they dare not attack, and for a generation they wander the desert. Generation in biblical terms means 40 years. If you read the generation, they mean 40 years. And they wandered in the desert for 40 years because they dared not attack. And the reason for this is quite simple. Israel was a bunch of tribes, maybe a few score thousand men, 40, 60, God only knows, but it must have been something in that order of magnitude, and their families. And they were in the Sinai desert, and they were a nomadic people. And instead of attacking, and what I was saying is these Bronze Age empires, these were massive cities. The Hittite Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Assyrians, these had existed for 1,000 years, had well-established governments. Okay, they were in decline, but they had huge strongholds, megalithic architecture, huge walls keeping enemies out. Large armies, and because these empires, they didn't rule with a tender heart. They were really absolutely brutal, and they simply destroyed any opposition against them, and that's how they survived for that long time. So the men of Israel, who were not that many, they simply dared not attack. And Numbers relates that God lets them die off and lets a new generation grow up. And these men, they trained for war, because men in those days did 2 things: supply their living, a living for themselves and their families, and train for war, because they had to defend their own lands, and war was common, and conflict was common. So every man was a trained soldier in those days. And so they trained for war, and they prepared mentally and spiritually for the coming assault. This is what Numbers describes. And next they go into Canaan. Next, after 40 years, after a generation, they decide, okay, this is the hour now. We must do it. And we've collected all the courage that we can find, and we're going to do it. And they move into Moab. I'll show you where this is on the map. hang on, the share screen. This here, and then here. Moab. This is a map of Canaan 1000 BC, so it's not relevant for our era because we don't know in what stage we are, but at any rate, Israel, they come together here in Moab. This is the base from which they're going to attack. And this is where Moses dies. Moses dies before the Canaanite conquest takes place, famously, and he can only lead them to the target, but the war will have to be led by Joshua, and Joshua takes over command, and he next invades Jericho. That's his first target. That's the first battle in the book of Joshua, and this is the Jordan. So they see the Jordan from here, and they move into Jericho. And hang on, I'll enlarge this. And this is where we're at, and this is the narrative. And next, Joshua in his book relates that they attack all these cities here. Many of the cities that we read about in Joshua are recognizable names: Kadesh, Byblos, Jericho, Ashkelon. So these are mentioned in the text or in names that we now know were referring to these cities. There are also cities mentioned in the book of Joshua that we do not know of, but where they were located or wherever. But at any rate, this is what the biblical narrative is about. And then after, Joshua basically wins every battle that he gets into, and destroys all these places, conquers the whole place basically, and utterly annihilates everything, because that's also very important. Everybody is killed, all the cities are completely destroyed, and nothing is left of them. All the livestock itself is slaughtered. It's not even taken. So, so this is what happens. This is what the Bible tells us that happens. And after these events, Joshua divides up the land between the tribes of Israel. And this is what is called the inheritance. Every tribe gets its an inheritance, and that is the end of the book of Joshua. And that is the biblical narrative. That is what the Bible tells us happened. That is the story. And now we're going to discuss next what the mainstream history is telling us about the Bronze Age and the Bronze Age collapse. And in the first place, what the Bronze Age is. Let's first introduce what the Bronze Age is. It started around 2500 BC, and it lasted until the Bronze Age collapsed, which is now well established. We have been around 1177 BC on the official timeline, I add, because the timeline itself is also a point of contention, but I'm using the official timeline for now. So 1177 before Christ, that's where the Bronze Age collapse happens. And between 2500 and 1177, there was a fairly stable international situation, and the situation looked something like this. Oh, this one here. This is what we have. This is the Hittites. This is Egypt. These are the Mycenaeans. This is a lesser empire. And here's the Babylonians, Assyrians are here, and these are, I'm not even sure what these guys were called, but the Isua is what they call them here, but there was another name for them also. But these were well established, and this is the Golden Crescent. This is this famous Golden Crescent that you hear about, the Mesopotamia, the Jordan, and the Nile. This system of huge and enormously abundant, rivers that gives enormous agricultural abundance. This is the Golden Crescent, and there was a lot of trade routes going on between these places, also with Greece, and even far further, because the basic economy of these empires was centered around bronze, and bronze is an alloy of mostly copper and a bit of tin. and then you get this metal, this alloy bronze, which was used for tool and weapons constructions in the Bronze Age, and copper was very plentiful. It was often found, mostly found in Cyprus, but there were additional mines everywhere. Basically, everybody had plenty access to copper, but tin was scarce and expensive, and tin was mostly gotten from Afghanistan. So that's not even visible here, but around here, so there were major tin mines there, a big tin supply, and also Cornwall. Cornwall in the south of England is famous for its copper mines, and also later a man like Joseph of Arrhythmia, the man, the uncle of Mary, also is known to have been in Cornwall. So there were, even in those days, it was a fairly normal international trade route. And they went even further, because they even went looking for tin in the Americas. This also happened. And Egypt, the Egyptians, for instance, are known also to have been in both North and South America, and the other empires probably also had their, the Greeks, for instance, had a very, very, very extensive international trading relations. So, but this is mostly lost to history, but by now it's pretty uncontroversial that this is what happened. Then this is true. There are all sorts of findings in America showing these relations in Newfoundland, and also in continental US. So these are the Bronze Age empires, and this system lasted for about 1,000 years. Egypt is even a lot older, and was preceded by Sumer, which is here, of course. Sumer, this was the first major civilization, basically, and the Assyrians, etc. These here, Babylon, Assyria, these were successor empires that built on the legacy of Sumer. And this was the situation, and this lasted until about 1177, and there was a decline. There was a long-standing decline of the Bronze Age empires. It's not really too clear why, but empires rise and decline. So we don't have extensive information about what transpired in these empires and in those days. But empires come and go, and these guys were in decline. And but they were still stable and there. And this is the situation then, where the questions come, because suddenly there is a catastrophic end to the Mycenaeans here, to the Hittites here, and in Canaan, where the Amorites live. The Amorites are a name for, well, the Amorites lived in the wider area, but Amorites were also very strongly present in Canaan, together with other Canaanite tribes. And Egypt was also severely struck, and Assyria. You see that also. You see that Assyria was hit here in the south, and Egypt had to deal with a couple of invading tribes and very serious threats also for Egypt. But Egypt was so strong that they actually managed to survive. They were very strongly damaged, and they never recovered really. Before then they were a strong and intact imperial state, but after the Bronze Age collapse, they were teetering on the brink of collapse basically, and we will discuss a little bit more about what happened there later on in later videos after the Bronze Age collapse. But we know this happened. We were now discussing the mainstream narrative, and we know that it happened with huge destruction. There were invasions from what is known. There were by different peoples. The Greeks are said to have been destroyed by the Dorians. Nobody really knows who the Dorians are, although there are theories. There's talk of tribes that came from Libya that invaded Egypt, and also the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples we will be talking about, but this is the mainstream narrative, that the Sea People attacked also Egypt, but also these states here. And these Sea People They attacked with complete brutality and ruthlessness. Everything was burned to the ground. Everybody there was absolutely slaughtered. The livestock was slaughtered. Nothing, no stone was left standing on the other. That's basically what happened. It was all destroyed and next burned to the ground. Everybody was simply absolutely killed. And we know this happened. And we know that the Hittite state simply vanished. Nobody ever heard of the Hittite state after that ever again. Basically, the only mention of the Hittite state was in the Old Testament, because Moses mentions the Hittites. We'll be talking about that later on. But that was the only source that we knew of, through which we knew of the Hittites. And it was only in 1834 that Hattusa, that's up here, Hattusa is the capital of the Hittite Empire, and this city was located here, and was found by an archaeologist. And that's what we know about the mainstream account. And the question is, who are these sea people? Where did they come from? Who are they? And they say they are different people, but okay, they are made responsible for at least for this series of attacks here. So, and the sea people are the big question. Who are the sea people? This is the question of the Bronze Age collapse. What drove them? Who are they? Yeah, why did it happen? And why was it so ruthless? Why was it so brutal? This is also a very important question of the Bronze Age collapse. And this is the mainstream narrative, and this is what I want to relate for now. And the hypothesis now is, of course, that Israel caused the Bronze Age collapse. And I'm going to prove this now in the next video to you with the biblical texts that show that what we know here, what is shown here, because this is what we know about what happened, that is exactly, and especially about the sea people, not discussing the Libyans and the Dorians, but the sea people, that what is said to have been caused by the sea people is in fact caused by Israel. And that's what we're going to prove next in the next video.